First of all, I grabbed a bunch of stuff. I often will screenshot stuff, and that is my preferred method. And I have not found an organizational system by which to categorize those things quickly, other outside of my like Notion. And the 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 obvious issue with that is that open with yes, open with this. Okay, and should add it to there. Okay, good. Um, the obvious issue with that is that they're all just called image and have a number next to them, which is like it's the same organizational principle as Trump's bots on Shitter or whatever that thing is now. Now, if I may, let's. One of the stories that popped up for me was this business here. Let me try to shrink this down so you guys can see it. There was an exchange between Eric Swalwell and Kevin McCarthy. And some of you, a couple days ago, you might have heard this or seen it, but I grabbed it just because. Context. They were in each other's faces, basically nose to nose, and Swalwell said something like, "Are we really going to do this?" After some back and forth with chest puffed out, McCarthy issued a challenge to Swalwell: "Call me a pussy again, and I'll kick your ass," the speaker allegedly said. Grown people. While both members told nearly identical versions of this story, they both delivered Swalwell's response in exactly the same way. "You are a pussy," Swalwell told McCarthy. Needless to say, there was no ass whooping that followed, so hilarity beyond hilarity. This was an actual thing between these two folks. I just think that's so money. It's hilarious. While both members told nearly identical story, they both delivered Swalwell's response in the same way. Everybody who watched this described it to you. He just literally had a "call me an asshole" Hancock moment and went ahead and did it, except for without the follow-up. Now, that's in my file of things, and so I just thought, it's funny. So next up in this lovely exchange, let's go back to Trump's plan on the electors. And like I said, a lot of this is stuff we saw. Who in the chat room, and besides almost everybody, watched the Jan 6 committee hearings and what were effectively the public trial around this? Because if you did, very little of this is new. This is just the chargeable stuff, because and this is how government kind of should normally work. The Congress has a hearing. They discover that there were crimes committed. They take those the allegations and the investigation they went through, and they refer it to the DOJ for for an indictment or for investigation to see if the DOJ concurs that they should also the charges should be filed. And either the DOJ says yes or no, but that's that. Whereas the Republicans just kind of drag this shit out, and I'll show you in a minute, because the news about like Comer and the Devon Archer thing is just so fucking choice. I love it. I just love it. I love it so much. I can't tell you. So anyways, there are a couple of moments in this that that are more like, I think we saw stuff around these filings, but not the actual text of some of the stuff, because either at that time the committee didn't have access to it, or they didn't want to show this until it was part of an actual indictment. Because the problem that you have in a situation where like the congressional committee is this idea that Trump or his co-conspirators, of which he has 6, 5 of which are known essentially, and a 6th is what's considered a political operative. So it could be anybody at the RNC or any random, toady that they have running around. But in the exchanges around this, at one point, one of them emails, or Rudy Giuliani calls this RNC person or whatever, and they go, the plan is have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governor. So the members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. They could potentially argue that they're not bound by federal law because they're Congress and make the law, which is just fucking stupid. Kind of wild / creative / illegal / nuts. I'm happy to discuss. My comment to him was, I guess there's no harm in it, legally at least. They're wrong. example, we would just be sending in, quote, fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone, arguably Ted Cruz, in Congress could make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. And I love how the fake ones are in quotes. Now, they go back to this whole thing about Kennedy and Hawaii. And the reason why they wanted to use the idea of Kennedy and Hawaii was there was an ongoing recount. There was a lawsuit filed, and past the regular date of certification, they were still arguing about this. And the difference in votes was like 147 votes. So it was so minor and so close that they were like, this could be kind of dragged out forever. So they were like, we're pretty sure he's going to win in this next test. So let's put together a group of Democratic electors because the Republicans are claiming they won, but we think we're going to win. We'll see, or whatever. So they effectively had another choice because the courts were going to play this out by the time they certified all the stuff. And they were like, we'll send both electors, and then whichever one wins, they'll just get on with it because it's 3 electoral votes and who gives a damn. And so the Republicans have been kind of using this as their legal justification for their group of fake electors. And Jack Smith points out in this indictment that the difference in all of these states is not 147 votes or 500 votes like Florida and in Bush v. Gore. It's 10,000 votes, 17,000 votes. And in the case of Pennsylvania, 110 plus thousand votes. Now, there's a lot of kookiness in this, and Trump in and of himself is just at one point lying to everyone involved, which is not surprising, but it's how, I think what's surprising to a lot of people is just how stupid and ham-handed it is, that he should be arguably, like if you know you're on the edge of truth, you should use as much of the truth as possible and then just kind of dress the truth in your lie. But in this case, he just flat out makes up a bunch of shit. And Pence, making a bunch of notes, contemporaneous notes, wrote down exactly how gigantic his lies were. Now, there are a bunch of things in here. Let me blow this up a little bit so you can see it a little better. Okay. This is when he's talking to like the RNC chairwoman, and they're going back and forth about this stuff. And the part of this is just like the obviousness of how he knows he's full of shit. But anyways, then I think this is Cassidy Hutchinson, the defendant's executive assistant, respondents in front of him, because everybody's like, can you just put this shit in front of him, let him know that it's done? This is it. The 6 contested, they all voted in parallel to Biden's electors. Like, we've got these fake groups running. RNC chairwoman is like, okay, here, you asked for it. They think they're part of a Kennedy in Hawaii kind of a scheme that if it turns, their stuff will be put in. Instead, what Jack Smith argues is that the fake electors, some of them, not all of them, but some of them were BS'd into thinking that they were just in case. It's like, we just want to have them ready as an alternate set of electors if this is tossed back to the state and the legislature moves ahead, and so we could just have a quick turnover and that'll be that. And they're doing it in multiple states where he had no fucking chance. All right. But anyways, this is the further part of it. So that evening, 6:26 p.m., the RNC chairwoman forwarded to the defendant, Trump, through his executive assistant, an email titled Electors Recap Final, which represented that in 6 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the defendant's electors had voted in parallel to Biden's electors. The defendant's executive assistants responded, it's in front of him. Like, okay, I gave it to him. The defendant's attempt to leverage the Justice Department to use deceit to get state officials to replace legitimate electors and electoral votes with the defendants. Now, we have been hearing a lot lately about the weaponization of the Justice Department. Have we not? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you that is this section right here is precisely what that is. This is I'm going to read to you a description of Donald Trump trying to weaponize the Justice Department. Pure and simple. In late December 2020, after he had lost horribly, The defendant attempted to use the Justice Department to make knowingly false claims of election fraud to officials in the targeted states through a formal letter under the acting Attorney General's signature, thus giving the defendant's lies the backing of the federal government and attempting to improperly influence the targeted states to replace legitimate Biden electors with the defendants. Now, all the free speech people who are like, he just told people this, and even if it's a lie, who cares? At what point it doesn't even matter? He's, if he's lying about this because he has, lying isn't against the law. That's by the way, the Glenn Beck defense, we'll just call it at this point. But ultimately, that is not what this is. This is forgery, essentially, what they're talking about here. This is Donald Trump forging, DOJ backup for what he's saying. And he does it multiple times to other people, to other government officials in his capacity as president. This is not some rando. He's still the president of the United States. Now, there's an argument that if a politician during a campaign said a bunch of this stuff and they didn't actually have the power to implement it, what can you get him on? Being full of shit? That's not illegal. Thank God. But in this particular case, he is using his power as president and the illusion of his control over and his access to information to lie to other people, to manipulate parts of the government in a way that benefits him against the voter. So that's what this is. Okay, so, and then, okay, on December 22nd, the defendant met with co-conspirator 4 at the White House. That's, no, it's not DeGenevieve. It's either Sidney Powell or, anyways, it's the other dude, I think. Anyways, at the White House, co-conspirator 4 had not informed his leadership at the Justice Department of the meeting, which was a violation of the Justice Department's written policy restricting contacts with the White House to guard against improper political influence. So this is just when he's trying to put people in charge of shit. This is when he was putting people in charge of the military, so in case he needed to use the Insurrection Act, he had, total control over the leadership. Like, just, and all this, like, we're a what you call it, like, we're not a third world country,
a ninth world country, not a third world country, a ninth world country,
right? So he's using all this kind of third world country horse shit to try and control this situation. On December 26th, co-conspirator 4 spoke on the phone with the acting attorney general and lied about the circumstances of his meeting with the defendant at the White House, falsely claiming that the meeting had been unplanned. The acting attorney general directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contacts with the White House again. So, I mean, just a bunch of shuffling and jumping around. Now, next. Also on the morning of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 met with the defendant at the White House, again without having informed senior Justice Department officials, and accepted the defendant's offer to become, that he become acting attorney general. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke directly with, this is Jeffrey Clark, Ben. Yeah, thank you. It's Jeffrey Clark. Because Clark was the one that they was like, I'm going to make him attorney general. And everybody's like, you do and I quit. So, yeah. All right. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke with Deputy White House Counsel. The previous month, the Deputy White House Counsel informed the defendant that there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th. Now, the same Deputy White House Counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting attorney general. The Deputy White House Counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been outcome-determinative fraud in the election, and that if the defendant remained in office nonetheless, there would be riots in every major city in the United States. And co-conspirator 4 responded, well, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. That's that part right there. Well, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. That's why that's there, so that we can just put that riot down. We can just open fire on them. We can just send in the military. We'll just use the Insurrection Act, and we will kill the rioters. That's what he's talking about, in no uncertain terms. Okay. Now we get to the Pence Trump stuff. And this is when he's, a lot of people have seen this phrase right here, the "you're too honest" part. Vice President, on January 1st, the defendant called the vice president, berated him, called him a pussy, apparently, because he had learned that the vice president had opposed a lawsuit seeking a judicial decision that at the certification, the vice president had the authority to reject or return votes to the states under the Constitution. He didn't believe he'd had it. He spoke to everybody else. Nobody believes he has it. They're clarifying the law, but it's not because they have to change the law. They're just making sure that nobody thinks they can thread this needle, or some lawyer in the future can't dick around and try and do this again, but with a more finely worded attack, so that people don't learn from this, find a hole, and try to dig their way through it. So the vice president responded that he thought there was no constitutional basis for the authority and that it was improper. In response, the defendant told the vice president, "You're too honest." Within hours of the conversation, the defendant reminded his supporters to meet in Washington before the certification proceeding, tweeting, "The big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place at 11 a.m. on January 6th. Locational details to follow." It wouldn't be just location. Details to follow. Stop the steal. And he didn't even hashtag it. He just slams all those words together because, he's...
I know words. I have the best words.
Yeah, he absolutely does.
An enormous, really an enormous...
Look, wait. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges.
I agree. So, fucking citrus, am I right? So, all right. Now, there are a couple of things that I noticed in doing this that are kind of crucial. Now, January 4th, the defendant held a meeting with co-conspirator 2, the vice president, chief of staff, and the vice president's counsel for the purpose of convincing the vice president based on the defendant's knowingly false claims of election fraud. So he was aware at this point because he was like, at this point, he's already had this conversation about, we'll let the next guy handle it because he thinks he recognized that Biden had won to other people. But in public, he's still saying he won because it protects him legally. The defendant deliberately excluded his White House counsel from the meeting because the White House counsel previously had pushed back on the defendant's false claim of election fraud. Let's be abundantly clear. He is removing his lawyer from this meeting because he knows his lawyer will bring up in front of the other people that what he's saying is not true. And this is the part where the vice president wrote down all these, like, his lies. And they just... Without his lawyer present, he doesn't even feel the need to try. Like, it's amazing. Okay, so during the meeting, as reflected in the vice president's contemporaneous notes, which Jack Smith has, the defendant made knowingly false claims of election fraud, including, bottom line, won every state by hundreds of thousands of votes. And we won every state. And asked, like, again, like, okay, even if you're being generous that he's saying we won every state, meaning the swing ones that went the other way, the ones he lost that should have gone his way, that's not even what he's saying. He's literally saying we won every state by hundreds of thousands of votes. He thinks he won, 52 out of 50 states. And regarding a claim his senior Justice Department officials previously had told him was false, because, again, he's like over and over and over again. He's just having, I guess, he's believing Sidney Powell over everybody else, or pretending to. He says, what about the 205,000 votes more in PA than voters? There are almost 250,000 more people voting than actually voted. No. Which didn't happen. Just garbage, nonsense, just made up, just fiction, just absurd fiction on every front. The defendant and co-conspirator 2 then asked Vice President to either unilaterally reject the legitimate electors from the 7 targeted states or send the question of which state was legitimate to the targeted states' legislatures. Now, the idea is that they had the legislatures, they thought they had them locked up with, like, low-level regional dudes that would they would go, no, he totally won. I don't believe it. Oh, in my neighborhood, there's all these Trump flags, and that's that. He thought that's how that would work. Okay. So, then after the fact, he lies. He has the RNC put this out. Or no, his campaign, the Trump campaign, puts this out. But he also tweets out basically the same thing. And he made this lie a bunch of times. The vice president and I are in total agreement that the vice president has the power to act. He'd been told multiple times by Pence that he can't do that. That it's not going to happen. So this is just a blatant, goofy fucking lie. Again, not even marginally close to any kind of reality. He knows he's lying. He's had nothing but contentious phone calls and arguments with Mike Pence about this. Mike Pence has never even said, maybe we could try this about any of it. He's just trying, essentially, this is him trying to get Pence killed. That's all this is. Because again, you know how I brought up the stroke of the pen fallacy recently? This is the most weaponized version of that in history. Because that's a dangerous lie to float anyways, because it creates like unfair distrust around a myriad of issues, whatever it is, like the president or my senator or whoever, or the mayor or whoever could, with the stroke of a pen, fix this. But okay, well then, if they could, there's only one reason why they wouldn't, and that's because they're evil and they want people to die on the street, broken, starving, and sick, right? And so therefore, that person's now a monster, not I have a political disagreement, or they've tried what I suggested and it didn't work, or they don't have that power to begin with and it's a lot more fucking complicated. So, but we get that. That's in the political realm. That's even bad enough, because it's immoral to make that kind of argument about another person that way. This is different, though. You have to understand the audience for this. The audience for this is the MAGA crowd that are going to show up on January 6th. The ones who yelled, hang Mike Pence. The reason they yelled, hang Mike Pence, is because they were under the impression that he could fix this and that it was true, whatever the fuck. He could fix this, he just wouldn't. Because he's with the deep state or George Soros or the globalist Illuminati Jew cabal, blah, 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 whatever it is. Doesn't matter. By the time they arrived there, they already were out for blood towards Mike Pence, because this dickhead was lying to these people literally, because listen, what is the natural extension of this? The vice president and I are in total agreement that the vice president has the power to act. No, that's not true at all. But if he's telling people that, then if Mike Pence chooses not to act, then he is in the process of engaging in the destruction of the United States of America. And therefore, traitor, treason, hanging's too good for him. That's far worse than the kind of just run-of-the-mill slacktivist online bullshit that people do about, like, I don't know, Biden could get rid of all this just by signing an executive order, like that kind of stuff, which is lame, but at least you can fight back on it. This guy was setting this dude up to be killed. It's the same thing as like yelling that, like, I think he's got a gun. So, okay. Then we go to this part. So, during the attack on the Capitol, there were a couple of moments where Trump goes off by himself and effectively tries again to get Mike Pence killed. And interestingly enough, he's not being charged with, like, wanton endangerment of another human life or any of that in this. This is my conclusion from this, but I don't know where else you go. At 2:24 p.m., after advisors had left the defendant alone in his dining room, this was the catch-up period, defendant issued a tweet intended to further delay and obstruct the certification. I would say further than that. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. So, and by the way, 1 minute later, 2:25 p.m., the United States Secret Service was forced to evacuate the vice president to a secure location. This came up and they're like, oh, fuck. He's trying to... The Secret Service were responding to Trump's messaging as a direct assassination attempt on the vice president. And within a minute, they were like, we're bugging the fuck out. He's sending people to kill you. They're 40 feet away. We got to get you to a secure location. And Pence, to his credit, was like, I'm not leaving the building. We'll hide someplace. And there's plenty of places in the Capitol that'll lock down. And even if you try to gas the place, everybody's fine. And it's just not enough for the entire Congress or the entire House. Is like, you know, these like safe room things are probably maybe 20, 30 people for 24 hours at most. But good Lord. But that's what this is. That's what this moment is. This is a minute in Mike Pence's life where Trump tripled down on his attempts to get Mike Pence martyred. Okay, then we'll go blow this part of it up again. Now, okay, so this is the kind of ongoing part of this. Let me try to move this down here. Whoops, scroll this down here. And we're going to get back out here. There you go. And another message intended for a U.S. senator, and this is Rudy Giuliani, I believe, contacting Mike Lee or Tommy Tuberville or Ted Cruz, depending on which one it is. In another message intended for another U.S. senator, co-conspirator one, Rudy Giuliani, also known as the trusted source behind the FD 1023, repeated knowingly false allegations of election fraud, including that the vote, and by the way, at this point, Rudy had lost in court multiple times. He was there when it happened. It's one thing when Trump's like, he's getting bad news from these people, and he can think, well, you only lost because you're bad at this. The truth is, we still won. Like, he could still, that's why Georgia's case is going to be the hardest to prove. The Docs case is what's going to ultimately screw him in this situation. But he has to be charged for this stuff because we have laws. But in this, Rudy was sitting there and was given, had to make, in theory, had to draft responses, you know, to these, you know, to like, you suck and you're bad at this. No, I'm not. All right. I repeat, let's see, the states to Congress were incorrect and that the governors who had certified knew they were incorrect. That was the other thing. That this asshole is saying, again, this is the same gaslighting that can get people killed. Were incorrect. That illegal immigrants had voted in substantial numbers in Arizona, and that Georgia gave you a number in which 65,000 people who were underage voted. Okay, that, it's just horseshit. Like, it's flat out horseshit. But they even bothered to go through this stuff and litigate at it. And it went nowhere. Because nobody underage voted in Georgia. Again, go look at who went to jail for fraudulently voting in the 2020 election. The vast majority of them, all of them are Trump voters, and the vast majority of them came from the villages. By the way, you're watching Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide. Like, subscribe, give a thumbs up. Venmo helps us out to help us get a new computer so that I can make graphics quicker. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, and thank you for being here, because you guys are wonderful. I adore you, and you're wonderful. Okay, now back to the Mutual Admiration Society. Now, okay, here we go. This is the timeline that's really fucked up. So at 7:01, and this is after Trump has sent his like go home video, you're very special, all that stuff. This is essentially they're like, remember this day forever, which in many ways is saying, stick around, come back tomorrow. We might be able to, you know, jumpstart this shit and you can attack again. Just go, you know, you forgot your guns, I guess. At 7:01 p.m., while co-conspirator one was calling United States senators on behalf of the defendant, the White House counsel called the defendant to ask him to withdraw any objections to allow the certification. The defendant refused. The attack on the Capitol obstructed and delayed the certification for approximately 6 hours. Let me move this over here. Until the Senate and House of Representatives came back into session separately at 8:06 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. respectively, and came together in a joint session at 11:35 p.m. Now, interestingly enough, this was never guaranteed, I would like to say, for the record. There was never a moment where you could say, like in retrospect, in hindsight, the Jan 6 failed, and they never happened. They all got back together, and most likely, but for some, genuine, rolling up of tanks up the steps or something, it was going to end this way. It was going to be a futile effort. What Trump wanted he just wanted to watch a bunch of people die on his behalf, it seems. But at the very least, he was just getting off on the idea that, oh my God, these people are doing this for me, right? And then, of course, when it ends and it fails, it's we. So, all right. This was never guaranteed, though. Even though more than likely this was always going to turn out because idiots were in charge of this shitty insurrection, this failed insurrection. 11:44 p.m., co-conspirator 2 emailed the vice president's counsel advocating that the vice president violate the law and seek further delay of certification. Co-conspirator 2 wrote, "I implore you to consider one more relatively minor violation of the Electoral Count Act and adjourn for 10 days to allow legislatures to finish their investigation as well as allow a full forensic audit of massive amount of illegal activity that has occurred here." Okay. There was no massive amount of illegal activity, period, end of story. It just simply wasn't. And this, you might remember, well, let's see if I can find this. That this story was, hold on. Yeah. At this point, the theory is that, they were just kind of, they were calling senators going, hey, here's an idea. When in reality, we know that even as, well, I think as far back as this January 2nd, and perhaps even later, Ted Cruz was involved with another group of senators that were calling for an emergency 10-day audit of Electoral College results. They had been coordinating with him, and he was working with them. Eastman was number 2. Well, yeah, and that makes sense because from a legal standpoint, his his stuff is number 2. I'm just saying for the record. An
Anonymous, really an anonymous.
I agree. So yes, John Eastman is number 2. I agree. So this part is okay. They do this, and then at 3:41 a.m. on January 7th, the president and the Senate, the vice president, announced the certification results of the 2020 presidential election in favor of Biden. That was that. That is done and fucking dusted. And then that's when Trump does his sort of callback, where he, and I want you to listen to this. This is an audio clip of this is Trump saying, it's one of the outtakes from his statement he made on the 7th, and they defiled the seat of power in the country or whatever, and he says defied, and that seems more like a Freudian slip than just a flub. Listen.
The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defied the seat of justice. It's defiled, right? See, I can't see it very well.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear that? Have defied the seat of it. Because he was saying they, won't take shit, essentially.
The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defied the seat of justice. It's defiled, right? See, I can't see it very well.
Uh-huh. And it's very telling that he mixes up the word defied and defiled. Whether he, anyways. Point being, he also is pissed. He also can't say capital, which is interesting because he chokes on his words. There are a bunch of times where he has these Kevin Kline in Fish Called Wanda saying I'm sorry, or Fonzie moments where he just can't get the words out, like bipartisan solutions.
Real bipartisan solutions.
Like he literally chokes on the words. And
the demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol.
The Capitol. Like, he can't get the word fucking capital out. Of course.
Yesterday's a hard word for me.
So imagine how you feel about tomorrow right now, dickhead.